Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists, this is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Not to set expectations too high, but this is the absolute best episode of Tracking the Tropics every year, and not necessarily because of content, because we are closing out the hurricane season. And much like most of the 2025 season, this hurricane season closing out on a quiet note. And the boss wouldn't let me bring champagne to throw a party, so I'm going to quit.
Darn. Won't see Rebecca next season.
Nope. If I don't get to drink champagne and dance on the table because we didn't get a hurricane, I'm out. Oh, welcome. I'm meteorologist Rebecca Berry. We're joined by the meteorologist Juliana Mejia. She does all the heavy lifting for this show, and I'm so appreciative of her building all the graphics and being here every single week, even on the quiet weeks. And man, we had some quiet weeks this year.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of just pulling at like straws of, figuring out what to dissect. And it's fun in a way to get to like nerd out about some of the, nitty gritty with tropics. And we had some great guests throughout the season too, with, very statistical kind of focused minds.
Yes.
But I will not complain. About a quiet
zero
season.
Complaints. Exactly. And so this is an interactive show. So if you have any comments or any questions, or you just want to celebrate with us and go, yay, you do have to use one of the hashtags, #HeyRebecca or #HeyJuliana, for us to be able to pull your comments, questions, and yays into the system. And so once again, #HeyRebecca or #HeyJuliana. We're pulling them from TikTok, Facebook, all over the world. Our digital superstar that also powers the show, Rachel, behind the scenes, making sure that all your comments and questions get pulled on, as well as doing all the technical, really hard stuff that I don't know how to do.
Yeah.
And so it is the end of the 2025 season in just 5 days, and that beautiful sight that we got to see so much this season. No tropical activity expected in the next 7 days, and also reinforcing how quiet it will be. Our averages right there.
Yeah. It's a wonderful feeling. We're at the finish line. The finish line at least is in sight. And even these past couple of weeks, the signal out there being so limited to none, basically, and having to, reassure people, yeah, we're going to ride out the end of the season. But even in my head, I'm like, knock on wood, like, please, just nothing.
Knock on something.
Yeah. I was talking with meteorologist Amanda Holly this morning and talking about how just weird of a season it was. Getting lucky in a sense of that Bermuda High, working its magic and keeping a lot of these systems, which again, it was a really open Atlantic kind of focused season 2, turning out to sea. And so I had kind of drawn that together. You can see all our little spaghetti noodles of a really, generally speaking, Atlantic focused season. The notable, or the only really landfalls being Melissa, Barry, and Chantal. Barry down in Mexico, but having brought devastating impacts because of the rain associated with it to Texas. So of course, yes, celebratory, and yes, luckily no landfalling. And that's actually one of the other notables. Is it's the first time in 10 years that we haven't had a Gulf or U.S. landfalling hurricane or a hurricane period in the Gulf. And yes, celebratory, but also, of course, keeping in mind the people that were impacted by systems. And it's always a reminder, too, that it doesn't take necessarily a hurricane or a landfalling system to bring impacts, again, like areas like Texas that had devastating flooding from Barry. Overall, then again, Melissa being the monster storm of the season, with breaking a number of records, tying a number of records, the Hurricane Hunter record being one of the, something that I think many folks will not forget, and hopefully we will never see. It would be nice to not see this repeated or tied. 252 mile per hour winds measured about 700 feet aloft. And shout out to the Hurricane Hunters for going through Melissa. That was also something was interesting about Melissa, is the Hurricane Hunters aborting mission at one point because it was just too turbulent. Is there anything that you like stands up to you, or that you're kind of walking away from the season thinking?
really fascinated by how the science has grown in terms of long-term forecasting of overall patterns, how we kind of had the hint that it was going to be a Bermuda track season pretty early on. We had the idea that we still would have kind of an average number of storms, but that they largely wouldn't be headed into the Gulf just because of the position of the Bermuda High and overarching weather patterns that we saw. But then to watch it play out week after week with not really getting much and then not getting anything by the end of the season, it was just really, really nice to not feel that anxiety this season. Last season was so terrible for the Tampa Bay area with those back-to-back storms, and just to not have to worry about that, I'm just really appreciative that we didn't have to deal with that. But keeping in mind, we're going to be watching Jamaica rebuild and watching a lot of those areas affected by Melissa rebuild, And one thing I think is pretty interesting there with the Cayman Islands and areas of Cuba, and that conversation kind of first started talking about how they had taken out an insurance policy that was paying immediately for relief. It wasn't going to pay for it all, but it got immediate relief money on the ground to start rebuilding infrastructure, to get aid where they needed it, and to really kickstart that. And so I think that'll be an evolving conversation as we watch how that plays out and see how beneficial it was if other countries need to consider something like that, especially if you are prone to hits just like that. And so I think that's another kind of takeaway from this season is countries taking care of their people in that manner. I would like to see it be successful, and I would like to see it be something that plays out across other parts of the world. Absolutely.
And of course, the many notables and many takeaways, a lot of growth, like you said, in forecasting. And there's also some notes in here as well, but comparing, I'm sure there will be questions too about like the Google AI and the AI models that kind of have come to the scene and more predominantly, especially this season. But overall, and shout out to Chief Meteorologist Jeff Brodelli for always having all of the great information kind of at hand. But this season, again, being an interesting season in the sense of the potency of these few storms, and that we had 3 Category 5 hurricanes, which, last in 2005, there were 4. And so that also, again, while being close to an average season, but ended up being, above average in the sense of the accumulated energy from these systems, the tracks being more or less favorable throughout the season, but still being a very potent hurricane season overall in the Atlantic. And then the extreme rapid intensification. I think it'll be interesting moving forward if we continue to see a trend of extreme rapid intensification, because, like studying meteorology in school, we talked about rapid intensification, and now more and more seeing these extreme cases, and whether or not, I'm curious, don't want to see this become a norm or seen more often. But that also was something very interesting and impressive in a way with the storms this season. But then, here, great comparison with hurricane forecast error and season track forecast error at 5 days out at a 5-day forecast, where that compares with the Google AI, the National Hurricane Center, and the American. Just interesting to see how well, we talked about this throughout the season too, how well the Google AI model was doing, thank you,
yes.
As well as specifically with Melissa also having significantly outperformed some of our, key models. So just interesting overall and exciting in a way too.
Yes, and we talked, one of the nerdier episodes this season was talking with the National Hurricane Center about how they're integrating AI into hurricane models and how they're looking at that. And he told us it might not be great at first, but it will get better so much faster than traditional models. But it was pretty great at first from this season. It'll be interesting to see if that continues to be a trend, and if that continues, or if it was just good at predicting this type of season. And so that's what I'm interested to see as we move into different types of seasons. Although early forecast models, which of course is a little bit la la land forecasting, but early forecast models for the overall patterns for next fall are very similar to this. So we could be seeing another Bermuda track year. Fingers crossed that we would see the hurricanes kind of staying out of the Gulf and out of the U.S. further away from the U.S. Anyway, that would be a refreshing thought. So if we get to pick a scenario, we'd like to pick that one, but we know that's not exactly how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else that you want to deep dive into, or do we have any questions from people at this point?
We do have one question. And after that, I do want to get into names, because people love talking about hurricane names and how they retired them and how they replaced them. But let's go ahead and launch our live Q&A. If you'd like to join us, celebrate, ask a question, anything like that, use our hashtags, #HeyRebecca or #HeyJuliana, and we'll be able to pull those questions into our system. And the first one is coming to us from Jeff Johnson, #HeyRebecca. Speaking for everyone here in Pinellas County, when I say good riddance to hurricane season. Exactly. So we are talking about the end of the season, how quiet this season's been. We're celebrating not having to rebuild from a storm like we did last year, 2 storms last year. And so join us in celebrating. We've got another one that just rolled in. This one from Melissa saying, #HeyRebecca, #Juliana. I saw rumors of a storm in the Gulf in the next week or so. Is it real? Nope. You can hide the people that are posting things like that on social media so that you don't have to have that anxiety. There are people that only make money through Facebook posts, and if they don't post anything, they don't make money. So they overhype every single little hint that there might be something, and they'll post those model runs and get everyone all worked up just so that they make money. Well, we make the same amount every day, no matter if we post anything or not. And so we are here with the straight talk and exactly what you can expect, never overhyping things. I saw those posts too. It was just the GFS doing what the GFS does, stirring up a hurricane 10 days out.
Yeah. Per usual. No surprise there.
No, nothing expected over the next 7 days. And so while we wait for some more of your comments, questions, and celebrations to come in, let's talk about the names. And so there are 6 lists of hurricane names and 1 bonus list. And so this is and they rotate between them. And so this was the 2025 list. And so at a certain point, they changed, because originally all the names were female names. And so at some point, a scientist went, that's probably not good. So then they started alternating them, male and female. So of course, Andrea is the female name, Barry's a male name traditionally. And so they alternate male, female. So next year, the A name is a male name and the B name is a female name. And so now it gets a little bit more complicated because they started retiring names. And so they, you never wanted people to have to live through another hurricane Katrina or anything that was deadly or damaging. So over the summer, the World Meteorological Organization meets and they decide which names they're going to retire and what names they're going to replace them with. And so it's, there's a lot of thought has to go into it, because if they retire Barry because of that terrible Texas flooding, they'll have to come up with another male B name that's never been used. And then a couple of years ago, they started being more mindful and inclusive, using more diverse names. And so, hurricanes hit more Spanish speaking countries than English speaking countries. We should have Spanish names on the list, that sort of a thing. And so you'll see some potentially more diverse names. The I name is the most retired name, just basically because it falls right there in the peak of the season is about when we get to the I name. And so the I names are getting pretty funky because there aren't that many I names to begin with, and we've retired that letter more so than any other letter. So that's going to be another thing. And so I did the Great American Teach-In last week on Thursday, and I was talking to 7th and 8th grade science classes, and I was telling them about it, and you can submit names. And so I think the classrooms are going to try to submit some B and some M names, since we anticipate those are the 2 that might be retired this season.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good idea. Also, cool to know.
Yeah.
I've learned something. I didn't know I could go submit a name suggestion.
And so that's part of what the World Meteorological Organization does great work, but this is what they get all the attention for, is the hurricane names.
Yeah, of course it is. And I had also thrown in here too, because of course, the more potent storms having the greater accumulated storm. But it was just interesting, I think, to see it laid out like this of, again, just these we had so many tropical storms. It was just an interesting season to me. And then just these few very potent Aaron, 32.2 accumulated storm energy, which is basically the duration and the strength, a measure of the duration and strength overall, and the energy that a storm produces. As well as Gabrielle being up there, Umberto, and then Melissa, all kind of those main contenders for who had kind of packed the most punch this season, which again, also because Melissa really stood out from the rest of the pack so much. And even Aaron too was, mainly out over the open waters, but really stood out this season as kind of a reminder too of, Gabrielle, Umberto, and our storms that had done that almost a little dance just offshore. It's all of it is almost feeling like a blur at this point,
Yes, it was a good season for weather nerds because we got Fujiwara, we got rapid intensification, we got some really symmetrical perfect storms on the satellite to watch. We got those fun stats and all the records broken with Melissa and her strength and the hurricane hunters turning around. So it was a good hurricane season to be a weather nerd, thank goodness. And so it does look like moving into we also looked back. I know we talked about comparing this to the 2015 hurricane season where we didn't have a landfalling hurricane. We also looked back at the 2005 season, and what was comparable with the 2005 season in this season, the 2025 season, is that we did have a very big heat wave during the summer, kind of keeping things quiet. We did have a landfalling hurricane in 2005, but I believe it was the B named storm, and it was somewhere in Louisiana, and it was a tropical storm. So that 2005 season was also very heavy on tropical storms and very heavy on, curving out into the open Atlantic before getting to the U.S. So now I'm, in my little mind being like 2005, 2015, 2025. Is it have something to do with the 5 years?
Right.
Like,
Right. Oh, gosh.
We're going to have to look at 2010. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
We'll have to look and see if it's every 5 years.
And then, also, I guess, because we had kind of roped in as well, the previous season, 2024, because just the reminder as well as of how I think lucky we got this season. It was a much needed break overall. Not a fun throwback to Hurricane Milton, especially for the Tampa Bay area, because I was in Southwest Florida at the time, and the storm enough was a mess for Southwest Florida, let alone areas here having felt much more of the direct impacts, but notable storms all around just from the recent years, and moving forward. Curious to see, again, we were talking about this in the last episode too with our guest speaker.
She was fascinating, by the way.
Fascinating about adjusting, and right now her research is presenting a new and kind of reformed Saffir-Simpson scale, and it would take a different name, but taking a different approach to rating hurricanes, in the sense of, I look at Milton and I look at our previous really strong, devastating storms here. Again, in recent year, kind of almost felt like back to back. We had 2022 Ian, and then 2024 just a mess. And this looking at it makes me think of, okay, now moving forward, how much better can and will we get with evacuations, with communicating the risk to to our community here in the Bay Area and just in general in Florida. And I am excited, I want to say, about the talks around potentially adjusting. And I can actually bring up, I think it was her suggested.
Yeah, I'll kind of introduce it while you find it. And so she's a researcher from the University of South Florida, so kind of close, our neighbor here in Tampa. And she and her team are suggesting that they change the way we rate the category of hurricanes based on 3 different areas: wind speed, rainfall, and storm surge. And so Juliana, walk us through what she was talking about last week.
So she essentially is wanting to adjust the rating of a hurricane to encompass all of the threats, all of the primary threats, because right now it is simply rated on wind speeds. And that then doesn't necessarily diminish. The goal is not that it's to diminish the other threats, but it to the viewers or to the community, a category 2 hurricane, because of the wind speeds being category 2, may not convey the same sense of urgency as a hurricane that could produce 8 to 10 plus feet of storm surge. And that can coincide. There can be a Category 2 hurricane that can produce, dangerous storm surge that would warrant evacuations, or et cetera. And in her research, she has found that presenting both the traditional rating of a Category 2 hurricane versus in this new rating scale, if you basically, in a way, add up, I don't want to completely botch the explanation here of the different ratings, but each category gets a category. Each risk gets a category. So then in this sense, if you have 2 major, is still considered 3 and up. So if storm surge in this case is a major hurricane Category 4, and rainfall in this case is also a major Category 5, then you up the rating. So the storm will always be in this rating scale, in this hypothetical rating scale, will always be whatever is the highest of these 3 threats. And so in this case, it would be a Category 5 no matter what. And she had presented then, I think it was, if 2 or more, then you bump it up another. So technically it encompasses the potential that we could have a Category 6 hurricane.
People do love the idea of a Category 6 hurricane.
Yes, and it's not for the reason that, when it went viral for that you think that it's because wind speeds are all of a sudden, like these storms are all of a sudden producing crazy wind speeds. It's because of this rating scale encompassing more of the risks, giving each risk in its own category. And I do believe, I think it's 2 or more. If 2 or more have a major, then you bump it up an additional
Yeah,
level.
I liked the example she was talking about. Because we kind of got scraped by Helene in terms of wind and rain, but the storm surge that we saw across the area would have been Category 5 storm surge, and so the messaging definitely would have been different if we had that updated or the new category system that she's proposing. And maybe people might have taken the evacuations a little bit more seriously, because we had 12 storm surge deaths from Helene. We do think that saved a lot of lives, because 10 days later we had Milton, and I think people that would have never normally evacuated did evacuate just because they had water in their homes for Helene just passing us by a couple hundred miles offshore.
And that's exactly what her research had shown when she presented the pool of folks that they had done the research with both scales. They were better able to identify the main threat in a storm, as well as then respond, I want to say more positively, in a sense of, okay, if this storm was presented to me and it's in the Saffir-Simpson scale, it's a Category 2, Category 3, like I can ride that out. Whereas category, because again, it would be rated differently. So what might be a Category 2 or 3 and the Saffir-Simpson scale might be a 4 or 5 in their presented scale. And that then provided this better sense of urgency to the people that were in this study, and they've said, no, I would evacuate in that case, or I know that the threat here is not the wind speed so much as it is the storm surge or the rainfall. So, the evidence is there, and she has plans right now. They didn't get a chance to, because of the government shutdown, to meet with the National Hurricane Center to present it to the National Hurricane Center, but that is the next step for them. I'm very kind of eager to hear what the reception is like.
I wonder if there's anything we can do grassroots to help her, because I just love this idea so much.
I know. And she had mentioned, I think, that they've been in talks with local emergency management groups and stuff, and they've garnered some support there and excitement there. So I think overall that should help them quite a bit as well. Really, the big thing for them is funding, as anything is in academia.
Yeah, unfortunately. Who's going to pay for it?
Who wants to foot the bill?
Exactly. So we are wrapping up our final episode of Tracking the Tropics. If you've got a comment or a question, or you just want to celebrate with us, use the hashtag #HeyRebecca or #HeyJuliana, and we will be able to bring your featured comment here on screen. Thanks to Rachel, our digital superstar, pulling him in the comments for us there in the background. But I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you, Juliana. This is your first season of Tracking the Tropics. You jumped in feet first, and you've really done all of the heavy lifting for this season. since this is not your first hurricane season, but your first hurricane season at WFLA, I'm going to give you the floor for a minute and kind of your thoughts and also celebrations for how quiet the season's been.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been learned a lot. Myself, I've learned so much, and every year, as meteorologists in general, a lot of takeaways, a lot of growth, I think, all around, as a community because, with the behind the scenes is the interesting part and the eye-opening part for me over the past few years of how we all are in this together of, okay, even competition, as well as working with the local weather service, working with the Hurricane Center of, okay, how do we make this make the most sense when we're communicating threats of tropical systems? And that has been over time, I think, reassuring in a way, but it really provides this fantastic sense of community as well as pride in what we do. And I'm just really hoping it would be nice to have a kind of a few years of a stretch of some quiet
indeed.
For us locally.
Yes, it would be so nice to continue this quiet stretch because we did get to concentrate on how AI is changing things and how AI hurricane models might be. If we had to deal with a storm or two, our concentration would not have been there. And so it's been good for us as scientists to really have this break.
Exactly. You can put your focus and time and energy into improving our product, into improving our forecasting and stuff. And because what I always like to tell people that, are outside of meteorology or my friend, that how, relatively speaking, keep in mind how long physics, how long all these different sciences have been around. Meteorology is a relatively young science and a relatively young, field of study. And, I'm glad to see how we've made leaps and bounds in terms of forecasting. This AI, I think, really presents a great, exciting opportunity to take kind of some big steps forward.
Absolutely. And so from the WFLA Tracking the Tropics Streaming Center, we are going to wish you guys a very quiet off season. You will not see us again until the beginning of hurricane season, unless a storm were to form. So we are not going to curse ourselves in that way. But once again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad that we made it through the season nice, quiet, and safe. And we have high hopes for next season. But either way, we'll be here. Thanks for joining us.